So we're going to talk about how we utilize choice theory at Eagle Ranch to regulate behaviors. And we have another YouTube video, please. Don't go too far, Harold.
I was just having a debate with a friend of mine.
Okay, so before I play, just introduction. So Will Smith is going to talk about the difference between fault and responsibility. Okay, so conflict in reality theory is he's kind of talking about that fault versus responsibility. One of the things that we look at, we have, ERA has 8 core values, and one of our first values is accountability. And accountability, by definition, I want you to think about is the knowledge that we have. This is the knowledge that we have. I can take responsibility based on the knowledge that I have. And so one of the things that we look at when our kids come in to the program is everybody else's fault. It's mom's fault, it's dad's fault, it's the bullies at school's fault, it's everybody else's fault. So we're looking for denial and avoidance. And one of the first things that we have our clients do is look at their responsibility, to start taking some of that responsibility onto themselves. And so what we do, like an amnesty process, where they're looking at, these are the things that I did that landed me in treatment. These are the things that I need to be responsible for. This is who I did it with, how I did it with, how much it cost, who I slept with, how many drugs I did. It's really kind of breaking through that reality and taking ownership of their behavior. We also want to look at sticking to the present, as Daryl talked about. We can't do a whole lot. Once we've taken responsibility for our actions, if we stay back in that past, that's where our depression is going to develop. That's where a lot of our issues are coming from, that we have no more control over because it's in the past. There's a cartoon clip, I think, from The Lion King, and there's like Rafiki is his name. And he goes and he hits, the Lion King Simba on the head, and he's like, ow, why did you do that? And he says, what does it matter? It's in the past. and he's like, oh, but that hurts. And he's like, yes. Sometimes it does hurt. Yes, it does. But let's stick to the present. What can we do now? What are your choices now that can help you cope and decide to move on from the past? Find out the choices in the present moment. What are my options? One of the things we like to do is give a lot of options. Any of you guys familiar with Love and Logic? The style of parenting, Love and Logic? We do love a lot of Love and Logic at Eagle Ranch because it's about empowering the client to make good choices. If they learn how to make good decisions, make a choice based off of an internal perspective, not an external, like I don't get points, or I don't get a high five or whatever just to make my bed in the morning. It's expected already to make my bed in the morning. And so I need to learn how to make good choices based off of doing the right thing, because it's the right thing to do, right? So what are my choices in the present moment? Do I need to react? Am I going to react poorly when somebody wrongs me? Am I going to be forgiving in the moment? Am I going to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and say, wow, maybe that person is having a really hard time. Can I show empathy in this moment? What can I do with what's being presented for me? All behavior is a choice. When we really truly look at that, there's a lot of empowerment over our behavior. And isn't that what we want to do? We want to empower our clients to know that they can make changes in their life that are going to be long-lasting and improve their quality world, as Daryl was talking about. So how we do that at Eagle Ranch is kind of in a form of self-government. Our students look at, or clients look at, what's the problem here? What am I struggling with? Am I struggling with depression? Am I struggling with disrespect? Am I struggling with language? I think somebody mentioned this morning that swearing kind of goes along with adolescence. I have to mind my potty mouth all the time. I'm not a sailor, I promise. But sometimes it's like, what do I need to do to recognize the problem, to fix this issue? And so it's about, first, number one, taking ownership of the behavior that caused that problem. So maybe my behavior is entitlement, and I recognize that I'm entitled. And because of my entitlement, I snuck into the kitchen and I stole donuts out of the pantry. And so it's like, okay, this is the behavior, this is what I've done, right? And so I need to take accountability. I need to know why, what was that impulse or what was that feeling that I had to say, okay, I really want these donuts, all those temptations, all those thinking errors that are going through, I deserve it, that's the stinking thinking, right? And kind of looking at all the things that are going to fuel that behavior. And then I'm also going to look at relationships. Is anybody going to know about it if I sneak into the kitchen and steal those donuts? Is anybody going to be hurt by the fact that I stole these donuts? We have an awesome cook at Eagle Ranch. Her name is Denise, and she's probably statewide known. Our licensing says she's always the top #1 cook in the state of Utah. She likes to put that badge of glory on. But she works really hard working with the kids when they are in the kitchen volunteering and doing work in the kitchen. So their relationship with her can very much be damaged. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to weigh those options on that relationship with her. What are my agreements? What are my agreements with my parents? Am I going to follow through with what it is that I chose to do? Is my behavior a result of a conflict within my personal values? Oftentimes, clients will self-govern in our program for something that they're conflicted with. I had a young woman who she was I think from New Hampshire, and she had a horrific heroin addiction. She was only 16 years old. As a result of that, she was homeless. Her and her boyfriend would then commit lots of robberies and muggings, different things in order to feed their addiction. And one night, her boyfriend brought another person along with him to break and enter into this home that was well known to have drugs and money in it. And it was a person that her boyfriend knew from prison, and they kind of tagged along, they crossed state lines and went and hit this house. And there was an older gentleman, he was in his 50s. Her boyfriend proceeded to take a back end of a pistol and whip him until he was unconscious and bleeding. And the gentleman that was with them went right upstairs. So she's downstairs kind of rummaging through, trying to find drugs, trying to find money. And unbeknownst to her, upstairs was 3 sleeping grandchildren of the gentleman that they just beat. And one of which was a 6-year-old girl, which the gentleman who went upstairs proceeded to rape. And she could hear the screaming that was happening as she was committing this robbery. Now, she was also under the influence at the time, and it really didn't have any effect for her at that moment. But when she came to treatment, those screams haunted her for months, and she had no feeling towards anything. She didn't want to feel anything. She shut everything down. And it was a result of this conflict between her values. She valued family. She valued, younger children. She had a younger sister herself. And so that conflict between it was like, how's my behavior in the conflict with these values? And what do I do moving forward? How do I forgive myself? How do I work through this travesty that my choices led me to? So what are the outcomes of my relationships when my values are violated or when I violate other people's? We're also looking at kids. We have lots of kids in our program that come through that have extensive trauma. Sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, and then the trauma that comes along with their addiction. So those are homeless or out on the streets, that are exposed to the elements of life. And so it's like taking ownership, how I put myself. There are some things that we don't have control over. If we're a true victim and somebody has victimized us, we don't have control over that. But as Kelly was talking about earlier, we do have control over how we react to that. We do have control over how we manage our behavior moving forward after something like this has affected my life or their life or whoever's life, right? So it's taking a look at how can I take some responsibility, empower myself, and go from a victim of trauma to a survivor of trauma, and be able to follow through with behaviors and coping skills on being able to manage my life after something really horrible happened to me. Okay? What choices do I need to make to amend my behavior? So rectifying, we have the 12-step model built into our program at Eagle Ranch. I created also a 12-step model for mental health, not just addiction. We use the basic 12-step model in addiction, but also one for mental health. So it's a 12-step process of looking on how to handle my depression, my anger, maybe the behavior of stealing, those types of things, and adding that. But as you know, step 8, 9, you're looking at making amends. How do I make amends? So I am taking ownership of my behavior. I know what I've done is wrong. What I'm going to do besides saying I'm sorry, right? Because sorry is like one of the most overused words on the planet. And it doesn't mean anything unless you don't do it again, right? And so it's like, what can I do to help myself? I'm gonna put something in place. It's a self-imposed consequence, or self-governments or self-imposed consequences that are gonna help me recognize not only my behavior, how I'm gonna make amends to it, but how it's gonna help me not make the same mistake over again. I need to find a way to choose a different path in my life. There was I think it's like a 19th century writer, and I'm totally gonna slaughter her as I'm paraphrasing, and it talks about the different chapters in my life. And chapter 1, walked down the street, fell in a hole, didn't see it coming, it's completely not my fault, it took me a really long time to get out of there. Chapter 2, walked down the street, fell down the same hole. Still don't know why I got there, still took me a long time to get out. Chapter 3, saw the hole coming, still fell in. Didn't take me quite as long to get out. Chapter 4, fell into the hole, saw it coming, knew it was my fault, and it didn't take me long to get out. Chapter 5, I just took a different street. So it's just kind of like, looking at your choices, learning from your mistakes. How do I make amends? How do I do something different? Talk about giving information to others, that accountability. I'm going to tell you what it is that my behaviors are. I'm going to tell you what's bothering me. I'm going to tell you why I'm struggling. And sometimes that's hard for adolescents, right? Trying to connect and trying to get them to open up and talk about really what's going on with them. And for those of you who work in residential treatment, this can be a long time process, especially if you have a very complex kid who not only has trauma, but they're adopted and they have attachment issues. Now they also have addiction. All those complexities that kind of go along with things, it takes a while to get them to open up, but eventually they start connecting with you and they start taking accountability and start saying, this is my bad. I really did create a lot of my chaos, and now I know how to fix it. So modifying and coping if a violation has occurred, part of our self-governance, our clients will look at this violation that happened to me. What responsibility do I have? What kind of responsibility do I have if I went to a party and then I got assaulted at that party? Maybe part of that accountability or ownership could be, I knew if I was going to go there, I didn't know anybody, that there was a possibility that something bad could happen to me. Can I take ownership in that? Can I recognize that? Can I change my behavior in the future after I accept that responsibility to say, do you know what? Like if I'm intoxicated and I'm in a room and I'm vulnerable, is there a possibility something bad can happen to me? Yeah, there is. Statistics show when alcohol is involved, the rate of sexual assault increases. Something like 30% it increases. So if I know that, if I have that knowledge, I can make a change and do something different with my behavior and say, do you know what, I'm not going to, number one, be drinking, because I want all my faculties about me, or I'm not going to place myself in a higher situation. So even when they're working in their program, not only are they self-governing for actions that they've done to other people, they're learning how to cope and modify their behavior for things that have happened to them. What is something that I can do differently? How can I respond and not react, just like Kelly was talking about. So what are my thoughts and feelings and beliefs? Our thoughts fuel our feelings, what creates our beliefs. That also, you try to help them, empower them, that they actually have control over the outcomes they have in their life. Where do you start? Where do you start at? Does anybody know? Out of thoughts, feelings, beliefs, behaviors, outcomes, where do we start? How can we change? Where do we have control? We talked about our thoughts, right? So we're gonna start right there. We're gonna cut everything off at our thoughts and recognize what our thinking errors are. What's our stinking thinking? What's fueling our behavior? What's creating some of the feelings and emotions that we have? And what's our belief system? What is this negative thinking created for me? If I'm a victim, and I'm always a victim, then I'm going to feel like being a victim. I'm going to feel like I don't have any power. I don't feel like I can make any changes or do anything different than what I'm doing. So once they recognize that they have control over their own behaviors, their own thoughts, they can make the changes in their life that are internal. This is work going from the inside out. If you go into a situation, as Daryl was talking about, where the external control is in place, what happens when the control comes away? What happens when there isn't somebody there telling me what to do step by step? Then they start to falter. And so one of the things that we try really hard at Eagle Ranch is to teach from the inside out. Teach them, I have power, I have control over my actions, my thoughts, my feelings. I can do something different. What choices can improve relationships even though a violation occurs? Sometimes, as they talked earlier today in some of the keynote speakers, they talked about what happens when the violation is somebody who's supposed to care for you or love you. What happens if during Dad's addiction, he physically abused you and he gave you a black eye. And now Dad's sober and he's in recovery, and you're still holding on to that resentment, or you're still holding on to that trauma. What can I do to help this relationship and find some healing in it? So we're going to kind of look at some of the things, some of the interventions that we do here at Eagle Ranch. We're going to give you a handout that has all these interventions down that you can take back with you, and kind of talk about the different levels of care. But I'm going to start at RTC level and kind of introduce some of these interventions. So I guess I'll start with this box. So this box right here is a wonderful tool, and you can use any type of box. I like to be obnoxious just a little bit and make it louder than life. This is what I call an anger box. Now this anger box can be a perfectionist box. This can be an anxiety box. This can be a depression box. And what I do is when I have a client that's really stuck in their anger or their depression, I will give them this intervention. And they carry it around everywhere they go. And as they're having these thoughts and feelings of anger, these situations that occur, I have them write it down and they put it in the box. And then every week during their individual session, we take out those issues and we identify patterns of their anger or their depression or their anxiety. What are their thinking errors? What's the situation that's going on? Is it causing a trauma trigger? What's happening? I had a client that was carrying around his box. His parents came to visit, and the first thing he did was come up to hug his mom. Hey! And boom! What was in the way of his hug with his mom? The light bulb went off. It was like fireworks in this kid's head. He's like, oh my gosh, it gets in the way of everything. Even my relationship with my mom, it really helped him see and take ownership, take that responsibility of how this anger was interfering with his relationship with his mom. And finally, at the end of his intervention, he gave it to me. Now, I'm all about not lip service. Don't give me lip service. You can tell me you want to get rid of it. Hey, Annie, I want to get rid of this box. And I'm like, uh-huh. No, really, I am so done with this box. I'm so done. And I'm like, yep. And until they hand it over to me, and walk away, then they're off their intervention. They get it. I can put this down, I don't have to pick it up anymore. I can recognize what it is. So the In Your Box is an awesome intervention that you can use. I even had a parent one time carry it during their visit, just because he mirrored the same anger issues as his son. I was like, hey Dad, here's your box. Okay? A backpack, a simple backpack, is very versatile. There's a lot of different interventions you can do with the backpack. For trauma, I had a young lady who was significantly sexually abused by her father when she was 4 years old to the time that she was 9. And he would often prostitute her out, do lots of horrific things. And she carried that everywhere with her. And she didn't recognize how much pain she was in or how much that really burned her. So I waved some sand. You want to weigh it, you don't want to cause any harm or red marks on her shoulders. And I put it in a backpack, and I told her she needed to carry it around. And I said, as you start processing things, while you process in therapy, while you're processing in group, while you're processing one-on-one with a staff member, every time you do that, we're going to take out a handful of sand, every single time. And she could feel that weight coming off. It is the physical presence of that weight carrying around with her. And it helped her so much to be able to, little by little, because looking at the whole picture was too much for her. She would shut down, she would scream, she would self-harm, but little by little, she was able to get through and work through her trauma. Other times, I might put expression blocks in there for my kiddos. They're like, I ain't talking. I'm not talking at all. So they have blocks that they have to get over, they carry around with them. They get tired of carrying around the blocks, so they're like, can I express now? Because these things are getting heavy. So expressing and being able to encourage them to do different things. But a lot of times it is helping them feel in a real physical sense what some of their issues are doing when they're carrying it around with them. So this is an awesome intervention to do. Who knew that a pool noodle could be so versatile? A lot of times our clients, especially our clients that have substance abuse issues, also carry the codependent virus, I guess you want to call it. And they don't know how to act on their own independently, and they're always connecting with a non-working peer or connecting with somebody they want to caretake, and so they get to hold each end of the pool noodle. And as they're working through their issues, they're talking with each other, they're identifying what some of their things are, and they learn to help each other in a positive and healthy way instead of adding to each other's sickness. Okay? And also, this one's a short one. You can get long ones. You also can use a hula hoop, just by the way. You can turn it into a circle, tape two of them together, and create a boundary bubble. So for your kiddos that might have problems with setting boundaries or invade other people's boundaries, it helps them know where their physical presence is and how they might step into somebody else's boundaries, how they might always be boundary breakers all the time. Or for people who really struggle with attachment, who get suctioned up to somebody, or somebody who has had their boundaries violated because of sexual abuse or things like that, they might know where those physical boundaries are, and this will help them learn where that physical boundary is at. And so pool noodle, great intervention. So I'm going to turn time over to Daryl, and he's going to talk about some play therapy interventions.
Okay, this, I did very makeshift, that is the Monster Box. A very creative way. Now, people, when they hear the word play therapy, they think it's just for kids. I'm telling you, it is not. Because some adults never really figured out how to play. So play therapy can be used by all ages. But the Monster Box here, as we know, as adults, and especially for young kids and teenagers, talking about feelings, they can be scary. So the Monster Box is an intervention where the family sits down and they, in a session, they create their Monster Box. Make it look however you want. color it, stickers, feathers, it doesn't matter. There you see, got my mouth. This is the most important piece of it. Has to have a mouth. Because what you're going to do is, throughout the week, they're going to feed the monster. It may be something that comes up that, one of those triggers that they're not ready to talk about. They feed it to the monster and they leave it there. And on agreed upon time, pull the monster box out, you sit together, the family, and you want to do it with your therapist, if at all possible. And they bring it back into the therapist, they dump it out, and they process everything that was put in. And here's the key part. A lot of parents like to say, it's just for my kid. No, parents need to feed it as well. Parents need to feed what their anxiety is. Parents need to feed what their fear. I just real quick, I'm working with a young lady who created the Monster Box. She was 12 at the time, and she created her Monster Box, and was in a week, she named him Bob. Within a week, everything that she had fed Bob and the box itself, she had ripped galore. She wasn't ready to deal with it. And she handed it to me, shredded and all, and I said, okay, when you're ready, we're gonna put all this back together. And I kept it perfectly, and bit by bit, she started piecing together everything that she had ripped up. We never got Bob back together, because that was the hope. But everything that she put back in Bob at that moment, when she was ready to deal with it, she started piecing it back together. I love this. It's fun, but it can be a very valuable tool, especially dealing with young kids who maybe in the moment, I'm not ready to talk about this.
I've also used this intervention in my private practice for school settings, for like IEPs and things like that. The Monster Box goes to school. I'm with them, and when they have behaviors and things like that, the teachers are like, okay, I think you need to go visit the Monster Box, or the teacher will write something down so that we can know what's happening during the school time, to add to, like, this is what's happening with school behaviors. It gives me as the therapist some information so I know what to do to help the school in the IEP setting, but also help them in my office as well. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And really, like, all the interventions that we have that are on this list, please, you can take them back and use them. They're really simple, but they can be very, very useful.